Hi guys, it's Brad here. Just going to give you a quick tutorial showing you how to use KCriteria, which is Kademi's API for working with database objects. Lets you write effectively SQL to retrieve them, and you can also operate on those objects and save them back to the database. So today I'm going to be working on K timesheets. This is an app in the Kademi marketplace, so you can use this if you want. This is the page where users enter timesheets hours. And just have a look at what we've got here in the back end. Oh, this is the actual folder structure. There is K Timesheets, the app. Under the app inf folder we've got app.js. This is all of our controllers, and I'll show you what I've done here in a moment. And then in the common section, these are all the assets which are available both in the front and back ends. This is where we're going to have our templates and components that I'm going to work with in just a moment. Now what I've done so far is I've created a new controller mapping. It's for the website controller, so it's front end. That's the path that we're going to access it on. It's going to render this template, review timesheets.html, so we'll work on that in just a moment. And just the normal sort of setup there. Okay, now right, so if I now, so I yeah, just one thing quickly. So I'm using KSync here. So when I make an update, you can actually see that it's syncing live into the account, and you can do the same thing using KSync to your account. So let's just verify that that is running. All right, so there we go. That is my template there. And if we look at that, review timesheets, I've just added a date range picker, and I'm also referencing this component, but which I haven't actually added that to my controllers yet, so I'll do that in a moment so we can see how that's done. Right, so if we do that now, come down to this section here. So I've got the three existing components, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste that in there and just step through this. So this is the app identifier. This is the ID of the component. We're saying this component should be available to all resources of type HTML. So that's basically everything that's delivered through the web, so it doesn't allow emails, and a description and a category. So now that component requires three files, which you can see here. Timesheets review component, that is the main template to render the component. JavaScript, any editor support JavaScript functions, which we don't have any, and any settings panel to be used in the editor, which we also don't have. So both of those files are basically blank. And the component is blank as well at the moment, just with a to-do message. Okay, so now that we've, I'm just going to save the controller mappings. And so now, when we refresh here, we should see to do. Great. Alright, so now this is where we can actually start working with KEditor. Alright, so okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with writing a query. Now you write a query here not using SQL but using an API. Okay, so this is going to retrieve a variable. I'm going to call it entries. We start with our services object, use criteria builders. This is the entry point to the KCriteria API. From there we're going to pull up timesheet entry. This is the KCriteria builder for the time sheet entry table. And then we're going to start building a query. But what I'm going to do just before we do that, I want to show you something. Because the question you've got is, how do you know the table names, right? So all I'm going to do is this. Actually, sorry. All I'm going to do is this. And then let's see what we get. So I'm just refreshing, and as you can see, what it's doing is it's telling me all of the builders that are available. And it's in the form of key value. So the key is the name of the builder, and the entry, this is the resource type that it's going to return. Okay. So that's how we know we want timesheet entry. Right. It just gets us here. So let's just walk through what we're doing with this query. We want the work date to be greater than or equal to the common start date. I'll talk about the common start date in just a moment. We also want it to be less than the finish date. Then we want to sort ascending by the worked by, so that's the profile that did the hours, and then by the date, and then we're going to execute the query with a maximum of 1,000 results. Now that is actually the most that you're allowed to ask for. Now if this is all in velocity syntax, so I think we need it on one line, and then I'm just going to dump that out to the screen to see if it is actually working. There we go, so I'll save that, that's updated, and then refresh the page. Alright, there we go. So you can see it has actually returned 2 entries. Now you can see how that's applying this date range. If I say go back to the previous period and refresh, now it's giving me different. So you can see it is responding to the date range. And if I say right over the last year and refresh, then it's going to give me all the entries. Alright. So now how do we use the entries object? To do that, we're going to have a table, and here's one I prepared earlier. Now just talk you through what I'm doing here. Now the first thing is I'm outputting the dates that we're actually filtering by. That's just handy to be able to see that users sometimes miss the date range picker. We're going to output the total number of hours for each user. We've got a header section. We're just going to display the name, the task, the date, and the hours. Alright, this is where we do our for each loop for each entry and entries. Alright, so the entry object is going to be a timesheet entry. We've just got a little bit of logic here to keep track of who the current user is. We only want to generate their spit out the total hours and generate their name when we're changing from one user to another. Just realised that's actually a little bit unnecessary. We don't need all of that. We can just do that. There we go. Okay, so this is the row, which is just going to, well, there's actually 2 rows there. One row is for the user's name and one is for their total hours. So this is the main row here, where we're going to look at what the timesheet entry is associated with. It can either be associated with a task or a lead. Remember, a lead is another name for a journey, or it can just have a label on it. We're going to display the date using a format date function to make it look pretty. And we're going to display the number of hours. We're also going to keep track of the total number of hours so we can display at the end. Then after the for each loop, we've got one last TR, because that's going to display the total hours for the last user. Alright, so I've saved that. Now if we refresh in the front ends, there we go. That's all my data. And if I just change that to 3 days, yep. Now you notice that now I don't need to refresh the page. It actually responds immediately. I'll just when I change the date selector. So I'll show you how we do that. Now first thing to notice is we've got an ID on a div around that whole table called timesheets review. And what we've got in here, this is a JavaScript file which is referenced from our dependencies. There he is there. Right, so that means that the platform is going to include that JavaScript file because it's a dependency. And in here we have this little bit of code. It says, so it's an event handler for the page date changed event, and we're going to locate the timesheets review div, and then we're going to call reload fragment on it. So it's just going to reload that portion of the page. And you'll notice that these dates here are also displaying because they're inside that div. Alright, well that's all, and I hope that was helpful. Thanks.